Okay, let's review what we have done up to now in this class, okay? We've already covered step 1, type of research paper and topic. And in our case, we are going to be working on a report. Remember I said that the report is the easiest kind of paper that you can work on because basically you are working on a paper where you collect information on a given topic. Within that first step, you also then have to decide on a topic. And as I indicated, sometimes the topic is determined by the class if you are in a classroom setting, or you can choose the topic you want. In our case, I submitted 6 possible topics from those that you recommended, and you choose the article, in other words, the topic that you would like to work on. Now I hope that over the weekend you have continued and have gone to step number 2, which is the step where you decide the references that you have to work on. So that next step, step number 2, once you have that topic, is to evaluate your sources. This step is very important because you have to remember that you just can't log into the internet and choose the first thing that you find. You have to try to get a bit of information. Is the website reliable? Who is responsible for the writing of that website or the article that you decided to use? And the same applies for a book or a magazine. Make sure that you evaluate your sources. So hopefully you have already done that and you have identified the 3 references, 1 that I gave you, that I submitted, that you chose, and 2 that you found on your own. And all 3 can be basically from the internet. In other words, the 2 that you identified can be from the internet. So now we are ready, and hopefully you've already read, we are ready to go into the 3rd step. And this 3rd step is very, very important. If you go back to the title of this lesson, it says that you are evaluating your sources and that you are going to start working then on your preliminary reference list for the mini report. And this part I emphasize because a lot of people tend to skip this step. They go directly into, reading and taking notes, and they start writing, and they forget that this is a crucial step. If you forget to copy information that you need for the purpose of citing that reference later on, you might find yourself that you have to then eliminate a source that is very important. And that has happened with students taking this class, and I would even say worse with doctoral students that sometimes do not have the complete reference for a very important article that they are using to write that paper, that dissertation that they're working on, a major research project. So do not skip this step and look at the examples that I have later on when I give you the different possible examples and rules that you have to follow in writing that preliminary reference list. In our case, even though I say here that you can keep them on 3x5 cards or that you can, get a notebook, in our case, you have to do it on a Word document because I will be collecting it. So let's go then to this preliminary reference list. And if you notice, step 3, preparing your preliminary reference list, I indicate what you have to do in Word to set up your computer, your document, so that you will have it following the APA rules. You are going to go to the section in paragraph. You're going to go to indentation, and you're going to make a click on special hanging. If you're using an older version like Word 2003, then you have to go to Format and make a click on Paragraph. I'm going to add, even though it doesn't appear here, I have mentioned it previously, that you should double space, so make a click on double space, and also make a check next to the sentence there that says, do not leave extra spaces in between paragraph. That will be the way that you will write your preliminary reference list. Now let's go to the possible examples, and that's the next lesson that you have, and it's titled Examples of References Based on APA. And we're going to begin with number 1, which is a book. Let's look at, for instance, this book that I'm going to show you there. This is a story that I wrote, a children's story, Gabriel Comeliros. I would treat this as a book, and in order to cite this in a reference, I would need to go then to example number 1. But notice that I give you different examples, so it's very important that you check the general rule and look at the different examples. Also notice that each one of the examples is double space and that the second line is always indented. So keep that in mind, that that's the hanging feature that I indicated previously. Okay, let's go to another example, number 2. And this book here, Personalidad y Literatura Puertorriqueña, and interesting, a book in Spanish. It tells you there that if you use a book in another language, you have to write in brackets a translation of the title. And in this case, this book has 3 authors. Probably you can't read them clearly, but the point that I want to make is that these are really not the authors of the whole book. What they did, they gathered together different articles, and if I go, for instance, to this one, this is an article written by Eugenio Maria de Hostos. Within this book, if I wanted to cite this, I would have to go then to example number 2 in my book. So let's go to example number 2 and notice that it says essay or chapter in a book. Okay, what about example number 3 that I have here? Let's go to example number 3. And let's look at the fact that I have there examples from magazines. So let's imagine that we are going to use an article from this magazine, Time. If I were going to use an article, I would have to look at these examples to cite my reference, okay? So look at, again, the general rule. Look at the examples, very important. Let's go to another example. I believe it's example number 5 that I have here. And example number 5 at the very bottom of my page, of course, remember that you're looking at your this lesson on the internet unless you have already photocopied it. Number 5 is journals. And let's look at an example of a journal. This is a book, a magazine, I'm sorry, that I receive at home, The Reading Teacher. This is my field. And the only difference between this magazine and the magazine that you saw previously is the fact that it's refereed, and that's why it's called a journal. Refereed means that in order to get it published, you need to submit it to an editorial board, and they decide if it can be published. So remember, if it were a journal, I would have to go to number 5. Okay. Finally, and probably number 9, the examples that I have in number 9, internet, are, you know, this is probably one rule that you have to look often because you're going to be using a lot of articles from the internet. Let's look at this example, okay? So I found this article on the internet, New Words for Webster's, Frenemy, and Webisode. And if I decided to use it, I would need to pay attention to the fact that at the bottom of the page, I have the complete address. That would be important that you jot down, because if you don't have the complete address, then you can't refer to it. In addition, notice that sometimes when you print pages from the internet, you get the date when you entered the site. In other words, this is the date that I retrieved the document, and you also need to indicate this when you are citing this reference. So now you are ready to begin working on your preliminary reference list. Remember that you are not going to rely on your memory. You need to refer to these rules, these examples, to submit your reference list. I will be collecting it this week very soon. Okay, good luck.